Before we start the meeting to just bid a farewell to our intern, Michael McLean. We just want to thank you for your services with the town of Edson and wish you good luck with the position you took with the town of Drumheller.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
And do come back and see us.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And can I get a motion that the agenda for the January 14th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted with the addition of sundry item G1, homeless shelter during the extreme cold weather, closed session item I1, multiplex steering committee update, and closed session item I2, proposed pilot project. Councillor Wilkinson will make that motion. All in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion that the minutes of the December 10th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Bevan makes that motion. All in favor? Motion carried. First up, we've got a delegation from the Human Resource Consulting Group. If Mr. Ed Gross could come forward, please, and introduce yourself. And then we'll get council to introduce themselves as well. And I'll just start with an introduction.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Ed Gross. I am the owner of HR Outlook, Human Resources Consulting Group, out of Red Deer, Alberta. And so over the course of a few years, I have assisted municipalities in compensation reviews and policy development and that sort of HR work. And also do a lot of leadership development, leadership training, recruitment, all sorts of HR things. So tonight I'm going to be presenting the results of the 2019 compensation review and the council review as well.
Okay, I'll just get our council to introduce themselves and then you can begin. We'll start with the mayor.
Mayor Kevin Zahara. Councillor Troy Sorensen.
Councillor Janet Wilkinson.
Deputy Mayor Crystal Byer.
Councillor Jean Chenard.
Councillor Jackie Curry.
Trevor Bevan. I'm Edson, Councillor Yellow Edson. I think we'll know this.
Nice
All
to
right,
meet you all.
please start.
All right. Okay. Well, let's take a look at the compensation and benefits review. Just as far as an agenda tonight, I thought I would start off with a little bit of a review of the background of compensation reviews in the town of Edson. Also talk about why market surveys, why we do them in the first place. Talk about some compensation principles and some language around that will help us, get through the data. And then actually look at the market survey. And we conducted a survey for council and for employees. And so the survey was sent out before summer 2019. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And then we analyzed and put together the data for the fall. And so it's nice to be here finally and be able to present the results. So let's start off with our previous compensation reviews. This one is the first kind of formal compensation review in recent history, and where we identified specific comparators and benchmark positions. And so in the past, the town of Edson has participated in a number of market surveys, some of them that I've conducted for other municipalities. And so with that market data, I know that has been looked at in the past to see how our positions here compare. But this is the first formal one in quite a few years. There is policy for employee compensation reviews, and it talks about doing them every couple of years. But again, this is the first one that we're doing in a while. So why do we do market surveys? The first one is to get data back from our comparators, similar organizations, municipalities, and see how we position in the marketplace. And to get a good indication of whether we're higher than market, lower than market, or somewhere in the middle. In doing that, we want to provide assurances to the employees and the community itself that we're our payment program, our salaries and benefits, are attractive and will retain the employees. And so attraction and retention is one of the major reasons why we do market surveys. And also in municipalities, there is competition for skilled people. In the municipality industry, there are a number of specific positions that are just municipality type of roles. I think of some of the planning roles, some of the assessment roles, some of the even accounting roles. They are definitely municipality focused. And so competition for those skilled people is important to pay attention to. Also, another factor in doing market surveys is location and lifestyle. And so when we're considering different locations and municipalities in those locations, we consider what would it take as far as cost of living and distance from any major centers, arts and entertainment, things like that, that we have to take into consideration and balance that with our total compensation model. So we do these market surveys to compare other municipalities to see where we fit. So let's look at some of the compensation principles then. So I typically divide the compensation principles into 3 different categories. The first one is external market comparability, okay? So how positions are compared with other like positions in the marketplace. So this is our compensation survey. So we go out and we find out that data on our external comparators. The second factor that we need to consider is our internal equity. And this is how our positions are ranked with other positions in the organization. And so that we have to pay attention to things like compression between different salary ranges, between supervisor and the employees that report to them. So we pay attention to that internal equity when we do compensation reviews. So we might, in the first principle, receive data back on the external comparable, but that needs to inform us on how that might affect our ranges and the compression between the ranges. So that's internal equity. And the last one is practical one called ability to pay, okay? And so, over time, we need to consider what the impact would be on our budgets and kind of how we plan for the future and the impact, on the rates eventually. So let's start off by looking at the external market comparability. So this is where I want to start introducing some terms that we use in compensation, and the terms help us to determine where we wish to place in the market. So I use 3 terms, and they're basic, comparable, and competitive. Now I'll go into more explanation about what each of these means, but I just want to introduce it first of all. A basic is the 25th percentile. Comparable is the 50th percentile, or the median, and competitive is the 75th percentile. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, when we compare with other organizations, in this case municipality organizations, we want to see whether we're basic, comparable, or competitive. And so in this survey, we have 11 participants in total, and so they were chosen because of their population size, their geographic location, similar types of organizations and organization structures, and that they form good, solid comparators. So we can, in that external comparability, that first compensation principle, we can be assured that we are comparing with other like organizations. So in comparing, we start thinking about our targets on whether we place in basic, comparable, and competitive. So basic, at the 25th percentile, that means that 75% of the comparators pay more and 25% pay less. Okay? At the median, or the 50th percentile, that means, say for a specific role, 50% of our comparators pay more and 50% pay less. And so that's the middle, or the median. So then we get to the competitive, P75, and that's where 25% of the comparators pay more and 75% pay less. So most organizations pick some type of target in the marketplace between the median and the 75th percentile. So that's why I put P65 there, because there are some organizations that I work with that have chosen the 60th percentile, the 65th percentile, the 70th percentile, because they want to be a little higher than market. Due to some of those factors I mentioned before, geographic location, attraction and retention of employees, so they have chosen to pay higher. And I'll give you an example. The town of Black Falls, they are at the competitive rate, the P75. So when they go out for market surveys, they compare their benchmarks and they come back and determine what the 75th percentile is as a target. And then they look at their internal equity to make sure that it makes sense as far as how the positions rank in the organization. Clearwater County targets the 65th percentile for attraction and retention of employees. The city of Red Deer, who I work with as well, targets the 50th percentile. The city of Fort Saskatchewan, I did a survey for them in the fall, or in the spring, and they target the 50th. The city of Tasquin targets the 50th. So there's a mix, as far as different municipalities in targeting where they want to place in the marketplace. Okay? So that's the bell curve is kind of the classic explanation of percentiles. But I also like to use an actual example, because sometimes that's a little easier to understand. And so we have position A. And so we go out to the marketplace, we gather the data from our 11 participants, and there's a wide range of pay rates for that particular role. And so behind that Excel formula, percentile, it will organize those rates from the lowest to the highest. And then what happens is it chops off the lowest and chops off the highest. And then the next lowest, the next highest, until it reaches that middle number. Or if there's two numbers that are in the middle, then it takes the average between those two. So in this case, between 55,850, 57,000, the median, or the middle number, is 56,425. Okay? So that's the middle number of what our comparators are. So targeting that number could be a compensation target. And same with the 75th. We use percentiles because it can be very exact and is more consistent and stable over time, because you are chopping off the outliers. Okay? And that's why we use it in compensation. Often I'm asked, why don't we just use the average? And the average is okay, although it's less consistent over time, because those highs and lows get averaged into that number, and you only have one target. So you cannot be very exact in terms of where you want to place in the marketplace. So hopefully that helps in terms of, as we go on to look at the data, to see, to understand basic, comparable, and competitive. With comparable and competitive is typically the range that organizations target for their compensation philosophy. All right. So then let's look next in terms of internal equity. And this is how positions are ranked in the organization. And I'll use an example of two bands. There's a group A band and a group B band. And so there are 2 positions in group A and 3 positions in group B, and this is what their current salary range is. So when we go out to the market, we look at that top attainable rate and the entry rate as well, and kind of see how we compare in the marketplace, whether we're in the comparable, the basic, comparable, or competitive. So in our model here, we have 10 salary band ranges, okay, those ranges, and there are 6 steps in each range. In this particular salary range, there is an even number, 2,500, between each step. Most of the ranges that I see have a percentage between each step, but in Edson we have a number, 2,500, from entry to fully competent. And so what we want to pay attention to, say from Group A and Group B, is in step 6, how close is that top attainable to each other? And that's called the compression rate. So we pay attention to that. As an employee comes on board here in the town, they may start at step 1 or 2, or depending on the amount of experience they have, and then as they gain experiences within the town, they move up to that fully competent top attainable rate. So this is something that we have to pay attention to when we do compensation reviews on our internal equity. And the ability to pay. And I don't think I need to elaborate too much on that. It's something that I know is on every council's mind, and something that we talk about every time I present compensation reviews. So let's move to the council review. Okay, so survey says, where do we fit in terms of the marketplace for council remuneration? Now, I first want to outline different payment methods for councils. And this has become, in 2019 especially, I've done more council reviews than I have in the last 10 years because of the January 1st, 2019 change in the tax, the 1/3 tax that was no longer available, or the exemption was no longer available. And so many municipalities had to make a decision on how to make adjustments, or how they should look at council remuneration because of that major tax change. So this brought to light that there are different payment methods, and there's 3 that I want to outline here: core salary, honorarium method, per diem method, and allowances method. And so when we look at these methods, there are some organizations that pay very much a full base salary. It's a set amount. Usually it's in policy, and so it covers all of the major roles and responsibilities of council members. And then there's some portion that is paid by per diem, and this is based on activities. So different councillors may be charged to go be on a committee or a special commission or something like that, and they're paid a per diem amount for that, over and above their base salary. The town of Edson, as I review this, is more on a salary-based system where you're paid kind of a lump sum or a monthly amount, and it covers the majority of your responsibilities and duties as a councillor. There are other municipalities that are more activity-based. And you always see this when it's up on the screen. That's activity with an I in there somewhere. Per diem, they pay more per diem in terms of activity-based, and they may have a smaller salary base. And so this is very interesting as I've studied council remuneration, is the policy, will have this base salary, and it may look like a low amount, but many of the council activities are paid per diem, or are paid by per diem. And so you do not really know in terms of what the council remuneration is until the audited financial statements are completed and all of the revenue, or not all of the salary, is put together in that salary and honorarium. And then there are other municipalities that have combinations of activity and base salary. So we have to pay attention to this, because when I did the review, I had to look primarily at the audited financial statements for 2018, because that is where the true picture comes out in terms of council remuneration and how we compare with our comparators. So I'm going to go through this And so I've analyzed it in terms of total remuneration. This is salary, honorarium, and benefits and allowances. Now, I'll just mention allowances sometimes come in terms of the payment of allowances for, say, IT. So a counselor is paid a lump sum, and you look after all of your IT needs. You know, whether it's computer or internet or that sort of thing, but it is a taxable benefit, so it has to be included under the benefits and allowances. So some municipalities allocate an allowance, others use a travel allowance. So rather than trying to keep track of all of the specific mileage, they'll give them a lump sum in terms of that covers all of their travel, and that is also a taxable benefit. So that is included in the allowances as well. So I look at total remuneration, just the salary and honorarium portion, and then the benefits portion. So let's take a closer look at total remuneration. So this is all in. This is from the audited financial statements, so our 11 comparators. So you see a wide range, and so I'll start off with column 1, the mayor column. And so you see I've divided it up in terms of the minimum, the P25, the median, 75th percentile, and the maximum, and the average I included as well. Then the next line is Edson's percentile rank. And what that means is on that bell curve, where are we as far as positioned, as far as we compare with the other comparators, other municipalities. And then we see the Edson rate, what our rate is in terms of total remuneration, and then the percentage it would take to at least reach the median. Okay, that's the comparable salary philosophy. So you see, when we look at all in, total remuneration, the town of Edson for mayor, we rank at the 0 percentile. So we are the lowest paid of all of the 11. Okay, for mayor. For councillors, we're at the 20th percentile. So we're just a little below basic. Okay, so that's salary, benefits, all in. And so this is the percentage it would take and the dollar amount it would take for mayor and council to reach the median for total remuneration. There's a reason why this is so far apart as far as our comparators, is that the other 10 municipalities all have benefits. Okay? The municipalities are paying a portion or all of the benefits for those councillors. So that's why in total remuneration, we do not have that number to add into total remuneration. So this will become apparent as I go through. So when we just carve out the salary honorariums, our position improves because we're only comparing that component of total compensation. So as far as mayor, the percentile rank increases to the 20th percentile. And for councillors, sitting at the comparable median, the 50th percentile. Okay, so when we just consider salary, town of Edson is fine for councillors, but low for mayor. Then when we look at council benefits, this is where the story is that we do not have benefits for councillors or paid benefits, and so this is where it has that impact, especially on total remuneration. So this is the story here in terms of the other comparators. That is something that is available to them and impacts their total compensation. When we look at the salary and honorarium, this is where it's important to talk about the differences between pay systems. So you'll have municipality X that pays maybe 30,000 salary, but their per diems may make up another 30,000. Okay? So this is where you really begin to see the story of those that have different payment systems, and really to compare the town of Edson with those other comparators. That's why the audited financial statements are an important comparator. Because when I compare the salary posted or the policy salary components, it may look like we're kind of in the mix, but in actual fact we're not, because they have a different payment system. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So then the other, in terms of the activity-based payment system, is per diems. So we rank at the 20th percentile for full-time and half-time, so you see that later on. So our rate of 250 is a little behind the median for our comparators, which is 300 for full day and 150 for half day. But because we're primarily salary-based, this doesn't have a big impact on us. So even if we change the per diem rates, this would not impact the salary story in the previous slides. But something to pay attention to. So that's the council review, the remuneration review. And so we see that, there are some decisions to be made in terms of how we want to compare in the marketplace. So let me move right on into the employee survey. So the same participants there. So again, geographic, population, similar types of organizations. And the first thing I'll talk about is our comparators, how they make organizational market or cost of living adjustments each year impacts us over time. Because when we compare in 2019, it tells us a specific story of whether we're comparable or more competitive. But then 2020, there may be a cost of living or a market increase applied to those 2019 rates. And in the policy, it talks more about us paying attention to CPI index and our comparator market adjustments. And so this is a comparison from 2018 and 2019, and we see that the average is 1.76 and 1.93 for 2018 and 2019. However, in Edson, we did not apply a COLA or market increase. Okay? And so that we need to pay attention to, because all of our other comparators have made some adjustments. And so in terms of the story of our salaries, this is a point where we may fall behind even into the future if we make some adjustments now in order for the 2019 salaries.
Could Councillor Sorensen ask a question?
Yeah, through the chair. I'm just wondering if this part of your presentation, does it include union staff or?
This is just the out of scopes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
These cost of living market adjustments are for all staff for the other municipalities. So what were the survey results for the employees? We were able to look at 29 benchmark positions. So, we had benchmarks within each one of our bands, each one of our ranges. So that helps us to inform how that range is doing. And so when I say blended market data, so we have a couple of benchmarks in each of those ranges, and then we average those out. Okay, so we, when we target a certain philosophy, we look at what that benchmark data is. So the average benchmarking rate ranking, so looking at those 29, the average is 42.7. So that's not too bad. It is below the comparable, the median, the 50th percentile. So on average, the benchmarks are coming in at 42.7. And so, and this goes back to the story of cost of living, market adjustments. It would be, we would be closer to the median had we applied 2018-2019 market increases. 56% of our benchmarks fell below the median. That's 14 positions fell below, and 11 were above the median. Okay, so there's a bit of a range, but that's 14 or below. And just looking at the average percentage to reach, let's say, the target of a median would be 3.3%. However, that is just to get the benchmarks to that particular target of the median, because we would also have to consider how many employees are in those particular positions and the other positions that were not benchmarks. So this is just on average of the benchmarks. To get to the competitive, the P75, averaging 8.7%. Okay, so the story there is that it's not double digit. It's somewhat close. But the next slide will talk more about some of the other considerations we might need to make. So salary band adjustments. So for the bands of the ones that we have, may require increases to target at least the median. 6 of the bands would then require increases to reach the 75th percentile, the competitive. So I looked at the median as the comparable, the 75th as the competitive, and what sort of adjustments will we need to make in our 10 bands to reach those targets. Most of the bands are kind of mid-level benchmarks. Except for the CAO, which is below market, and then some of the mid bands. Other bands were closer to the median. Okay, so that is something in terms of that's the external data, the external comparability. Now we need to make some choices, and we've been looking at those choices of how those adjustments might be made, considering internal equity. So does it make sense to increase this band by so much percent, and what impact does that have on the bands below and above that particular band? So this is kind of the science part is the external survey. The art part is the internal equity, making sure that it makes sense for our organization. So we also looked at employee benefits, because this is part of kind of our total compensation. And so when we compare with our comparators, you see the town of Edson is the shaded red numbers. Okay, so we fall into that area. So as far as our premiums for the benefits, life insurance, dependent life, dental, etc., we kind of fit in the more towards the center, more of the comparable. 15% is covered by the employee, 85% is covered by the employer, the town of Edson. Whereas, you look on the far left, there are, for life insurance, 6 of our comparators pay 100% of the premiums. But then we also have one comparator that does not pay any of the premiums. Okay, so that tells you a little bit about kind of our benefits and the amount that were covered there. The next one is definitely a developing benefit is the idea of healthcare spending accounts, flexible spending accounts. This has become a great attraction and retention strategy, and it augments the benefits, especially when the premiums are not covered 100%, or there's lower thresholds as far as what might be covered. Like say for a physiotherapist, some organizations might cover $500 a year, others $750, some $800, but the difference for an employee might be covered under a healthcare spending account. So it's an attractive type of benefit. So 6 of our comparators have that type of wellness benefit. We fit into the no category. As far as other wellness accounts, these are taxable wellness accounts. And so we do have coverage. $250 is covered for, these are, I think they're fitness types of benefits. And so they're an advantage for the employees, but they are taxable. So you see the averages there, 545 and 410 So we kind of fit below the average for the other wellness accounts. And then the last one, or the next one, is around retirement savings programs. And this one, especially for municipalities, has become a very focused and important one because of the local authorities' pension plan maximums. That once an employee reaches a maximum, and I believe for 2020 it's around 170,000, then they receive no benefits for any salary above that local authorities pension plan maximum. And so municipalities are providing other retirement savings programs to top up for their typically more leadership positions, general manager, director, CAO types of roles. And so we see, usually they choose one, or on occasion, like the city of Red Deer, for instance, has Apex and Municirp. But most of the municipalities, especially the ones in our group, they have one or the other, Apex or Municirp. So this is the top-up type of retirement savings programs for those leadership roles. Others have an RSP program. Some of them are matched. But as far as the leader type of roles, typically they are matched to help with the difference between their salaries and the LAPP.
Councillor
Sorry,
Wilson.
through the chair, could you tell me what Apex is and what Municirp is?
Yeah, they are retirement savings programs that I don't know. Municirp, I believe, is specifically for municipalities. I'm not sure about Apex, whether it's a broader program, but it's like a pension program, and so it's voluntary.
Annuity type thing that you pay, or it's going to be monthly, or what type of thing?
Yeah, it turns out to be a cost share between the employees, so they contribute so much, and the employer contributes so much, and but the employee determines how much extra they want to have covered. But this is over and above local authorities' pension plan. Yeah. So it's a type of retirement savings program, much like an RSP. But there are administrative costs to that Apex and Municirp program to participate in them. And so I'm seeing some municipalities moving towards a matching RSP program, just because it's simpler and it's helpful
So
to
who
be.
manages those? Like a wealth management person that manages the top two, and they charge for them
Yeah, they're actual
monthly?
company pension plans, like companies that look after that, the funds, just like a pension plan. And those are the two popular ones for municipalities. So, and again, I don't know for sure if they're only for municipalities or whether they have a broader reach, like some other pension plans.
And did the government take those two over then for their revenue now, as they did with the Alberta Teachers Retirement Fund?
I do not know.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, so that's the story around retirement savings. And then vacation is the last one. And so what you'll see is the thresholds for vacation, 3 weeks or 15 days, 20 days, 25, 30, 35 days. And then the next line, you see the number of comparators that have those thresholds. So all of them have the thresholds up till 30 days. And then it goes down very quickly to 35 days. The town of Edson is tracking, fairly well as far as the average. And 25 days, 30 days, we fall a little bit behind as far as our threshold. So town of Edson, for 25 days, it takes 14 years to reach that 25-day threshold, whereas the average is 12.6. So and that's the average. So there's some that get there sooner, some that get there later. And then 19, fairly close, 18.4. And then all four of the comparators for 35 days is 25. So that's also something to consider in terms of time and time off. So that is the employee market survey, and the salary component, and the benefit component. And so as far as next steps go, for council remuneration, policy direction is something that I would recommend as far as a target, and whether that be the median or some other target, that is council's choice. There are different municipalities that have different targets up to the 75th. There's only one municipality that I work with that has something greater than the 75th, and that's the Red Deer County. I believe it's the 90th. Although I do caution any organization that goes above the 75th percentile, because then it becomes quite volatile, because that the top payers varies quite often, and so when you start chopping off the high lows, you only chop off one or two before you get to that high. So I would recommend something between the 50th and the 75th, comparable to competitive. And then in terms of, this is the interesting part of implementation, because of council, election cycles and things like that. Many times in policy, the direction is that council remuneration is determined maybe the year before the election. And so the decisions are made for the next council. That's one example of policies that I've seen in the past. Others, like in 2019, including the town of Edson, looked at grossing up the salaries to deal with the third lost in exemptions. And so that became a very common measure, and so adjustments were made midterm, and that's fine too. So it depends. There isn't any direction in policy right now, council remuneration. It just states what it is. But that's something that I would recommend us looking at closer in terms of determining a target and when that will be, remuneration will be determined. And as far as employee compensation, again, there is, it's called a market rate, is in the definitions, is the median. And so whether that's direction in policy that we should target the median, that's possible, but it's in the definitions. So it's not saying directly that, for employee compensation, we should be at the median. But at least, in terms of our analysis, we looked at the median up to the 75th percentile. And, in terms of that direction and the budget implications on the individuals, and that's typically, implemented at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So the 2019 results would be implemented in 2020. But then we also need to recognize that all our comparators are looking at COLA or cost or market increases. So we need to consider that, as far as applying that on the results of the 2019 survey in order to keep up, so that when we do another market review, we're not already a year behind, and that be compounded if we don't do a market review, say in 2 or 3 or 4 years. So that's something that I wanted to mention as well. All right, so I didn't want to take up too much time, but hopefully that gives you an overview of the compensation and benefit review for council and for employees. And any questions?
Okay, Ed, thank you for your presentation. This ties in with our strategic plan on organizational strength and resiliency. So thank you for working with our HR manager, Colin. We'll open the floor up to questions. Councillor Chenard.
So overall, my observation is we're doing fine. We're in the average, and I agree with your thing. If we're going to increase, especially council, you usually do it towards the end, and you vote the next council rates. Because right now, other than the mayors, the council, we're right in the right medium then. We're not underpaid, but we're not overpaid.
Okay, so I just want to clarify some of the language there. So as far as salary and honorariums, council is tracking for councillors at the median, so not the average. So the average is very different than the median.
Okay.
Okay, so targeting the median for salary and honorarium only, councillors are okay, mayor is short.
Right.
It's at the 20th percentile, okay? And so, but if we want to consider total remuneration, which should be a consideration of council, you're the only council out of the 11 that do not pay benefits, okay? So you fall much farther behind other comparators when you consider total remuneration. So we're not targeting well in total remuneration, it's only in the salary honorarium.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
If no one else has a question, I've got one. So I noticed on the 11 comparative municipalities, they were all towns. When you talked about the why we do this, the competition for skilled workers, our closest municipality is our county, and their office is within our town limits. So when I compare that out of scope workers for the town of Edson, in my mind, I think they're the closest ones that we would be in competition for. Do you have any idea what their comparative salaries would be?
We did survey them as well, Yellowhead County, and so I have that data. But in terms of comparing apples with apples and things like that, started off just comparing the municipalities that were closer in terms of urban municipalities, population, geographic location. So that's definitely a consideration to have other types of municipalities in that mix. As far as council remuneration, it's very different.
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair. Excellent presentation. I've been waiting a long time for this report, so thank you very much. I'm wondering, are any, how often, or maybe it's rarely done, but how often is per capita used as a factor for figuring out council remuneration? I assume that larger municipalities get higher remuneration because of higher demand, higher workloads and whatnot.
Maybe. It depends on the municipality. There's only one municipality that I've worked with so far that looked at per capita, and that was the town of Black Falls. And so their study was very specific in terms of I think they had, I can't remember exactly how many comparators, but they had so many towns specifically that were population lower and so many towns specifically higher, and they were right in the middle. And so then they did the calculation of per capita, and that served them well because of who they picked as comparators. So it was a very strict science. And those comparators were different than the employee comparators. They had to be.
Right.
And especially since, because I don't believe they included the city of Lacombe, but they did include some other ones that were closer to population size. But for employees, definitely they include city of Lacombe, city of Red Deer, town of Sylvan Lake, because of the geographic location. But council comparators were different. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Curry?
Through the chair. Thanks, this was really good. Would you mind going to the employee market just so I can see for my question? When you were talking about one of the survey results.
Results?
I think
Okay,
it
so
was
this
that
is
one. Let's see. The next one.
Okay.
I think. Yes. So when you were talking about the internal indicators and making sure that we are staying within the comparables with that, looking at this, that we have 4 bands that are under the median, is it common play to bring those up, but then knowing we have those 6 bands that are close to the 75, so they're already over the 50? Like within our internal indicators, can we do that without putting that pressure on?
Well, that is the art part of all of this, because the external comparability, the competitiveness, or how our rates compare, by adjusting those 4 bands to the median, it may apply some pressure on the bands above it or below it, or
Yeah.
due to not to typically below it because it's moving it up and away from the band below. But we have to pay attention to those compression rates between them. And so out of the 10, if we target the median, there's 4 bands that might require specific increases to target the median. But I'm glad you brought this question up because I didn't mention this in this slide, because there are certain benchmark positions in those bands that we have to look and ask the question, do they belong in that band? Because the market is saying that they're way higher than, and so that's blended within that band. And so we have to make a consideration. Maybe only one of those benchmarks should go up to the next band and leave the band on its own. So that's part of the internal equity question that we've looked at, and determining whether something that's really out of whack in that band should stay there and inform us about how that band's doing, or maybe that benchmark should move up. We also have to consider some of the other positions that we didn't benchmark that maybe are similar level. So
So it would be good to do a review of our bands.
well, and we
positions.
are reviewing each one of those positions to determine kind of, is it a band change or is it a reclassification to another band. And so the 4 bands is to reach the median. If we targeted the competitive, the P75, there's 6 bands that would require some increase. And again, the same question or same analysis of whether there's positions in those bands that should be adjusted versus the entire band. So that's.
And is this where the target, so it would be the norm to say if you targeted the 50 percentile, those 4 would move up without the other 6 moving because we've already met the target.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'm interested in how municipalities are calculating their COLA, their cost of living adjustments. Are they basing it on, my personal gut feeling is to base it on cost of living, some external index that can, but I'm wondering how municipalities are handling that issue in general.
Yeah, there's at least two or three major ways that municipalities look at that market adjustment or cost of living. And I tend to like to call it market adjustment. You probably heard me say that many times. I include them together, market adjustment, cost of living. Cost of living, method 1 is looking at the consumer price index, okay? And either year over year, November to November, or October to October, and tracking that to see what that increase was. It was a great method as long as the numbers seemed to be reasonable. So when 2018 came in as 2.6, everyone goes, oh, that's way too high. Especially in our economic condition and environment and stuff like that. And so let's look at this as a market adjustment, and maybe 2% is more reasonable, or 1.5. So consumer price index is one method. The second method is more of a market adjustment, and that's based on maybe negotiated collective agreements within the organization and administration matches. Okay, so if the unions are 0, out of scope is 0. If it's 1, it's 1. Or some type of combination of those. And sometimes that they wait. And so I know at least 2 or 3 municipalities that I work with that they'll wait, and now they apply their market adjustments July 1st until they find out what everyone else has done, and then they look at the average of that. So it's an interesting strategy, but that's the other method. Second method is that market adjustment, whether that's informed by union negotiations or their other comparators and what they ended up actually doing. Because in the fall, the HR group calls each other or emails each other, what are you going to do for 2020? And it's like, oh, we think it's this, we think it's that. Until those budgets are approved, you don't know for sure. And then in hindsight, you find out, well, it didn't quite happen that way, or it was more, or it was adjusted July 1st.
Okay. All right, if we don't, one more question, or sorry, Councillor
Sir,
Swanson?
did you get your turn?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Oh, just through to administration. When did we establish these bands? Not long ago, right?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson. I don't remember the exact date, but I believe it was 2017 when the salary structure was first brought forward and approved by council.
Okay, Councillor Swanson.
Through the chair to administrations, I'd like to see, I'm not sure what your next steps are, but I'd like to see you guys come back with a tax implication for reaching both of these groups to say the 50th percentile, and maybe another number, maybe 60th percentile or something, I don't know, but a report that shows tax implications, and then I think that's personally my next question.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you through the chair. It is our intention that we would now soon bring forward a policy piece which would include requesting policy guidance on a percentile target that would help us build our program moving forward. So that is our intention.
All right, no further questions?
That's what I was
Right.
gonna ask for the policy.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
We're happy that you were able to make it out this evening. And you're welcome to stay, but if you
Don't drive
want
anywhere
to
tonight.
He's going to
wanna
walk and start at
move your evening
5.
along, you're also free to leave as well. So, thank you.
so much.
Great information.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
We will move on to the reports from staff, from corporate services. I believe we have our corporate services manager, Michael Passy, presenting this evening on uncollectible linear accounts.
Good evening. So in your memo, you'll see that the provincial government has allowed these two programs, the PERC and the DIRC, or the DIRC and the Provincial Education Requisition Credit and the Designated Industrial Requisition Credit. What these are is for linear properties in oil and gas, the province is allowed it to be if the municipality writes off the taxes which have been due to either unable to pay, or if they went bankrupt or closed down or unfolded, we're able to write off those taxes and then receive a credit for the educational requisition, as well as the designated industrial requisition, which is when they assess those linear roles and those properties. So what we have, and the attachment is showing two of these accounts that have taxes owing, and you'll see the totals owing, the school requisition, the 5,800 number, and the DIP, the $18. That would be the amount of money that would be credited to those requisitions in the following years.
Okay. I think Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, they talk about getting back the school fees. Now, what about with Evergreen Foundation? Because we put taxes on as well. Is there any talk of them refunding that back to us too?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson, there hasn't been any talk about through this that I have heard of. At this time, they only have for the school requisition and for the DIP.
Is it worth asking? Because, I mean, the government asks us to requisition these funds on their behalf.
We can definitely look into it more and see
Okay,
what
thank
if
you.
they have things more, but this time it's just these ones.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Councillor Shenard.
Just clarification then, so on the 40,000, so then we would be getting back, if we applied for $5,800 from the Alberta government? Or am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, no, right about, so the 40,000 is the total amount of taxes owing.
Right.
We'd have to write that off, and since we are unable to sell those assets as in a tax sale or that
Right.
Type of thing, they just kind of would sit on the books perpetually. And so what this program allows is for us to at least get back that credit for the
5,000.
school. Yeah.
And what is DIP?
That's the designated industrial properties.
Okay, because I just looked at it, I just wondered. Thank you.
no further questions. Thank you, Michael Lynn, for your presentation.
We'll bring that forward at the next council meeting to have those ones written off and
Okay.
then proceed further with
Thank you.
done.
And we'll move on then to our community and protective services, the lighted pedestrian crosswalk, which we have Al Schramm, our Director of Protective Services, presenting.
It's cheap.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to bring this report to council. Make sure I get this right, there we go. One of the things that came up at the strategic planning in 2019 from council was a direction to kind of look at and review some possible locations to install these pedestrian crossing signaling lights for pedestrian safety. So as a department, our Community Protective Services, we did get together, we kind of took a good snapshot of the community, and we came up with 6 potential sites that we wanted to present to council for your review. The 6 sites are listed up here. Number 1 is a trail crossing on Edson Drive. And we'll go into a little more detail individually as we go through the report. The crosswalk at 3rd Avenue, 56th Street, which is right by the Edson Daycare Center. The 6th Ave and 40th Street Hospital Traffic Circle. 13th Ave and West Haven Drive. That location is just north of Tags, or west of Tags. 6th Ave, 57th Street, which is the airport east boundary. And 6th Ave, 43rd Street, which is the ravine crossing. This kind of gives you a snapshot of the locations that we identified, of the overall locations that we looked at. And next we'll talk about each location individually, just to give you an idea of the rationale when we looked at these sites. The sites are in order of what we think is priority. Number 1 location is a trail crossing at Edson Drive. We think this is a high priority. There's large traffic volumes coming in off of 748 into the community, plus heading out that way. We do have high traffic speeds, and this is verified. We do have a speed advisor located at that location also, and it does capture a lot of the speeds of the traffic coming in, especially traffic traveling southbound coming from the north. The speeds are relatively high. Limited visibility. The crosswalk is right at a bit of a bend, and most importantly, it's a trail crossing. So we kind of identified this as our number 1 priority for consideration, and we talk about this. The second location that we talked about, and it's another high priority location, is the 3rd Avenue, 56th Street, and that's the crosswalk over from the Edson Daycare cross over to the museum. Large traffic volume. We did a traffic count there with our portable advisor in the summertime, and we're averaging about 2,800 vehicles per day on that street, which is amazing. We were shocked at the data that we've seen. Large pedestrian volume. We have a lot of the daycare people crossing at that location. Most of those pedestrians are parents and small children. And we've also received several complaints, mostly from the daycare, of the traffic concerns on that. The speeds weren't that bad. Again, the advisor had showed us that the speeds were pretty well in that 30 to 35 kilometer, which is pretty tolerable, which is very large volumes. Our third location, which we identified, was the 6th Ave, 40th Street. That was the hospital traffic circle. We kind of tagged this one as a medium priority. Again, large traffic volume with 40th Street and all the traffic heading to the hospital. Kind of average pedestrian traffic, more so in the summer than in the wintertime. One of the concerns on that one was limited visibility. The Community Protective Services Department did do an initiative this fall by thinning out some of the branches to open up that visibility as the trail came right into that intersection there, and it did have a big improvement. As we drive and we look at it, it's very obvious, that the pedestrians can see the traffic and traffic can see the pedestrians. We kind of tagged this one as number 3, and again, a medium priority for you to consider. Our 4th location that we identified was 13th Ave and West Haven Drive. This is straight west of the tags. It's kind of a medium priority. There's an existing crosswalk there already. High traffic volumes. Again, we had our traffic counter there, approximately 2,800 vehicles per day at that location as well. It is a crosswalk for school children from Poplar Place Trailer Court. There's a designated crosswalk there. There's an opening in the fence. And with the snow, and I've done a lot of observations there, there's a lot of students using it. You can see a lot of footprints in the snow using that. So we kind of identified this as our 4th location, and again, a medium priority. Our 5th location was 6th Avenue, 57th Street. This is the trail connector on the east boundary of the airport. Average traffic volume, it's surprising how many people are actually walking those sidewalks and walking that trail along the airport. It is a trail system connector, and then average pedestrian volume. So we kind of tagged this as a medium priority as well. And our sixth location is 6th Avenue and 43rd Street, which is the ravine crossing. We kind of take this one as a low priority. Average traffic volumes, we did a traffic count there as well, about 1,200 vehicles on average per day on 6th Avenue. Seasonal pedestrian traffic mostly there. In the wintertime, we're not seeing a whole lot of traffic on that ravine, but in the summertime there are. It is one of our designated trail crossing systems that we have. Some of the information that we'll give you is product information. We did reach out to some suppliers of these. We've got an estimated cost per standard crossing, and they range from anywhere from $14,500 to $16,500, and then that range is dependent on some of the options you get with these traffic advisors. And there's an additional $2,500 if we want them to come out and install them, which makes a lot of sense. They're the pros at doing these installations. So total estimated cost per crossing is about $17,000 to $19,000 per crossing. The units are solar powered, so there's no need to run power to them. And we really think this is a project that really falls well under our public safety initiative fund, where we designate so much funds from our revenue from fines and that collected, and we have a current balance of about $107,000 in that account. Again, we see this as a multi-year project. Installation of 1 or 2 of these per year makes a lot of sense. And then we can also give us the opportunity to review the priorities of the locations annually. If another location pops up that we think is very needy, right, and it has some pedestrian safety concerns, we definitely want to have that ability to review that. And again, like I said earlier, the project aligns really well with the public safety initiative fund that we have already created with the revenues coming from our fines and that. That's the report. Any questions?
Thank you, Al, for the report. We'll start with Councillor Chenard.
Okay. Al, actually good report. It's not the kind of lights I want, but I do like it. So what you're saying is we have 107,000 so far in the savings for this?
We have 107,000 in that public safety initiative.
In the public
fund.
safety thing, because then just estimating, like, just installation by this time is about 20,000, so I would agree, let's start with at least 3. And can we share the information of 3rd Avenue and 56th Street of the 2,800 vehicles of the Alberta government? Because that continues on to the one-way where we want other traffic lights.
We could share that. I know they've done traffic counts on the
Right.
intersections, so they should have that data.
And the other, just to follow up the question, between 3rd and 56th Street, where all the daycare traffic, does that mean they're parking in the museum parking lot? Because if they're crossing, then where are they crossing?
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, I believe, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong, that there are some designated parking spots in the museum for the daycare.
Okay, I was just questioning on that, but yeah, no, I agree, we should go at least 3 of them.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Zahara?
Thank you very much for your presentation. We've been anxiously awaiting this to come forward to council. I agree with the majority of these locations, with the exception of number 5. I think there's lots of visibility there, so I would put that as a low priority. I travel that road every day. I do agree there's lots of pedestrians, but really good visibility. We don't have traffic parked on each side of the street. I do think another location would be 16th Ave and Edson Drive.
Yes.
It's as you're coming around the corner. Once again, Edson Drive, high traffic volumes. A lot of people like to speed along that, and there's a lot of kids that are crossing from the schools into the Tiffin neighborhood. That would be my piece of feedback. I would drop number 5 and add that into the mix. And I think we should just get this done this summer. I would use half, if we budget $120,000 to get all 6 locations done, I would take half out of the public safety initiative and the rest from the energy reserve account, which we have a lot of money sitting there that isn't being used currently. So I think it's just better just get it all done at once than trying to drag this on for a multi-year project. But that's just my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sorensen?
Thank you, through the chair to administration, or through the chair to my councilwoman. I recommend that we proceed immediately with locations 1 and 2 for Edson Drive and the Edson daycare locations, and then pick off one of these a year for the following years. I agree with the mayor. Number 5, I think, is a very low priority. It's extremely high visibility area. You can see half a kilometer in all 3 directions. So I think there's very little reason for an extra light there. But those are my recommendations. If I may, also have one more question to administration. Is it possible to have a portable version of this to put at the review for location number 6 just for the summer months? Because you said it has no real impact in the winter.
Through the chair to council, I just want to say, we can research that for sure, see if they do have portable ones. This is some of the research we can do. But definitely we can look at that.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, thanks very much. It really is a great report. And I guess I'm just questioning, the trail crossing in Edson Drive, where it pops in there, where will the location be? Because if it's right where the trail crosses, it's too late almost. It would have to be warning people just as they're coming down from the north, wouldn't it?
To the chair to council Wilkinson, we would do an evaluation there with the contractor when they come in. The lights are very visible, they're LED, they're going to be
Right.
bright. And typically for the traffic coming into the north, once the lights are activated, the ones on the east side should give them visibility, right? Because they'll be flashing on both sides of the road.
Okay, good.
But we'll do an evaluation for location for sure to make sure the visibility is
And
accommodated.
same with that traffic circle at the hospital. That is a huge one, the way the trail just happens to be built. You're just too afraid to step out there because you look to the left, but they're just pulling around there too without a little bit of warning before. And I agree with the mayor that number 5 could be eliminated. But even number 4, I think there's good visibility there. There may be high traffic, but certainly good visibility on 4. That ravine one on 6, I think that's quite dangerous too, when you've got people walking on the trails, because people are just hitting down 6 and they don't really see them there. And I also would like just to go ahead with all the ones that we can possibly go ahead with. This is going to save people's lives, really, so it's well worth it. And we can't do anything by A&W.
That's a highway.
I know it's a highway, but it's also going to be blood on the ground there pretty soon.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, on your number 2 here, the Edson daycare, I know that gets used a lot here, but if the traffic lights ever go in on that corner there, how's that gonna back up when we've got the lights that people are stopping, and the daycare wants to get across? Is that gonna hamper traffic flow through there to try to get through the lights and back up onto the highway again and that?
Through the chair to Councillor Evan, I think anything you can put there to advise people that there are people crossing is going to be a benefit. Even with the traffic lights area, the traffic will be stopped, but what those lights are activated is still going to make sure that the traffic are going to be aware that there are people crossing. And especially with the daycare, when you're dealing with young children, I think it's imperative that those signals are there regardless of the traffic lights or not, because there's a ton of pedestrians crossing there.
There's a ton of pedestrians, but they look at 2,800 vehicles per day, and I've been down there when that whole block has been solid traffic, and I know the kids are trying to get across, and most people are stopping for them and that. But I think we activate a set of lights here. Like, I agree, you need a set of lights in for sure. But I just wanted to people are turning and coming off the highway trying to get down, is that gonna be backed up onto the highway? They're gonna have to wait for the light change and then try to get through or whatever, Like, I agree we should have it there for sure.
CEO Derica.
I think, and please I'll add to this if you have additional information, but I don't think I would recommend that we move these locations often, but I think that if any location was to change in some material way, for example, if there was traffic lights put in there, and then we felt that this particular lighting system was no longer, or if it was redundant and no longer helpful, that we could move it to a new location. It would obviously just cost some money to move it. And so I think with where we are, unfortunately, with what we've heard from the province, it's going to be at least a few years until traffic lights are installed there. My thought would be that we would proceed with something like this, and then in the future we can obviously reevaluate it and maybe relocate those assets if there's a location that may warrant it better. But Al, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. But
They pretty much sums it up very clearly. So.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair. Just kind of going on what Councillor Wilkinson had said there. So there is no possibility, we know it's years before we have lights, that we could put a couple of these on the highway with approval, and then as soon as the lights go in, move them. Because the reality is that's the highest priority. So is that an option or not even remotely an option?
Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, through to council. I think that's something this council has to give direction to administration, that this is something we want to do. If that's council's prerogative. I am very disturbed on the lack of action on the provincial government's part on these pedestrian crossings. We've had fatalities, we have issues, we know this, and this has been going on for decades. I just sent a a letter to our MLA today. Thank you for Kayla for preparing that, which I'll forward on to all of you. In my letter, I suggested that they need to move up the traffic lights at 56th and 4th. And if they are able to do that, then we would step up to the plate and start installing some of these pedestrian crossings at some locations along the highway. I think A&W, the A&W location is horrendous. And I also think that 56th and 4th is horrendous as well. Luckily, we do have that as part of the capital plan in the province. Unfortunately, it's not until 2022, which is unacceptable. And there's no timeline for the A&W location. So I think it's either we have to make the decision we're going to do something here because it's a priority to our residents. I don't think we should let the province off the hook. And I think we should make it very clear that this was not our responsibility, but because they were not filling their obligations as a people responsible for Highway 16, that we've been forced to this location. I would fully support putting pedestrian crossing lights at that location as an interim basis. Because I think quite clearly the little crosswalks that they put on prior to the last election just created a more dangerous situation in our community, and they had they did no consultation with us on that at all. So,
Okay, CEO Darcott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the mayor suggested, obviously administration will pursue whatever directive council gives us. I would just, for council's information and consideration, once we begin talking about putting lights on the highways, I just have to tell you that the costs will be significantly more because Alberta Transportation will require a certain standard of the light pole, and it will be one of the large ones that go over top of the entire highway. And so I would suggest we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, not $20,000. That's just for information of council.
Okay, Mayor Zahara.
I would have to disagree with the administration on that. Hinton's installed these just like they are, and as other communities have along the highway corridor. I'm not saying that they may not require some additional things to be done, but I don't think that that it's going to be like that. And if it does come to that point, then I think we can make a different decision.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I think just in this discussion, I think it's really important that we invite our MLA to come to council and all of us talk about these various issues to him. I just think this is so unacceptable that we don't have something on the highway, and to put up with it for 2 more years is just utterly ridiculous.
Councillor Chenard.
The only thing I'd caution against these lights we're saying putting them up, because I agree with Mike, CEO, that when you cross the highway, they're not 20 grand. We're in that neighborhood of around.
They have them in Fort Saskatchewan.
No,
on
but
the
when
highway.
what they're saying
like
when we
this.
explored it before, because even if we look at the cost of the traffic lights that we have up right now, the one and only set, those are going to be up in that probably 200,000 plus, where these are 20. The only thing is, I agree with the mayor's letter. We need to be strong. We need to put our foot down and say, guys, we need something done, and it's a possibility, like we discussed before, that if the cost is $1 million, which I can't understand why, but they're saying that we invite our MLA, we strongly go after them and say, if you guys cannot, then we may budget in to say, okay, since you don't want to do it, maybe we'll cost share. What's that number going to be? 60-40, 50-50, but we need to put pressure on the province. These other lights, I believe, are similar, mean safety, but I don't want to confuse both issues. This is our pedestrian in our town, they have no control, but once you get to the highway, they can say, well, you're going to do it anyway, and then they just step away from it.
In Minister Transport, I mean.
Oh, yes, so I mean, that's where the thing is, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all safety, but we don't want to confuse the issues. We're at the mayor's letter, and something coming up too as well, we need to put pressure on them.
Absolutely.
Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, I fully agree, and I don't want to lose. I think it's the job of the province, but it's been 10 plus years, and they haven't done it. And the safety, and we've had fatalities. So I think we can continue to blame the province, but it's our town.
Yep.
So ultimately, it is us that has to make a decision. From administration, I would like to see the cost analysis of having them on the highway, and then what the movement would be. And I would just like to add location 5. I see what you guys are saying about visibility. What is somebody that crosses there on a daily? That is the most dangerous in the sense of speed. So when you talk about fatalities, and I don't know, Al, if that's just putting the speed indicators there, but I have had people fly by me because they're going 100 kilometers an hour on that road often. Like the speed at which people, because it's at straightaway and people think it's, so people actually, you think it's high visibility, but most people don't see you because they're driving too fast. And so that's my only thing where I see visibility, it looks smart, but speed-wise, it's one of the most dangerous ones I cross because of the speed. And I don't know, maybe it's just putting a speed sign there for a while to cue people, but the speeds on that road are terrifying.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Yes, I have to agree with the mayor there. I was up in Hinton here a while ago, and they just got these same type of lights up on their main thoroughfare there. And they just walk up, push them, they flash, and there's no overhanging lights at all and stuff like that. I'd like to know how they got around it, you know. Did they, what permission they got, how they went about doing it. You know, if they've done it, why can't we do it? If it's gonna cost us, you know, 20 grand for something like that down there, I mean, it's worth it. I'd really like to find out how they went about doing it.
Okay, Mary Zahara?
So I, through the chair, to Councillor Evan, I did talk to the mayor of Hinton about it, and they, the town did it on their own, and they paid for it through their photo radar revenue. So they worked with Alberta Transportation, got the necessary permissions. They do have service roads there, so they are a little bit different. But those lights are actually right at an intersection, and there's, I don't even know if there's a sidewalk on the other side, but I know people cross there all the time. And I've seen them in other municipalities on the highway, just like that, because these are, these solar ones are fairly new in the last few years, and more municipalities are moving in that direction. I'm not in favor of paying for a full set of traffic lights, but I think this is a good measure. We are generating revenue off the highway through our photo enforcement program, and I think that would be an acceptable use of funds, and I don't think the taxpayers of Edson don't really care who's paying for it as long as it gets done. They're sick and tired of putting their lives at risk. So.
I think we may add that. Certainly administration would be very, very pleased to learn that Alberta Transportation was permissive of this type of thing and is not opposed to that in general. We would just have to be mindful of whatever parameters or guidelines or standards that they do impose, and if this was available, we would certainly be happy to present that as an option for council to consider.
And I just haven't had a chance to comment on them. I agree with some of the other councillors that mentioned maybe doing a few more than the one or two. I think if we have $107,000 in there, and this is something that the residents have been asking for quite a few years, I think that we should try to proceed with as many as we can. Whether that's 2 or 4 or 6, I don't have a particular one, but I think that if we have quite a few high priority ones, then at minimum I would prefer to see those completed this year. And so we've talked about how the government has prolonged the highway crossing. Maybe we, another option instead of writing them another letter, because it doesn't seem to be very effective, is to use some of the information from our Lobbying the Government seminar and trying to form a grassroots group within the town to, have them do it, because that's what we've seen has been successful for other areas around the province. The residents are upset and they're voicing that through us, but maybe we can make their voices louder and push them in the direction that would be more helpful. So I don't know if that's an idea that we could pursue. Councillor Bevan.
Yes. Is there a possibility, Chair, that we could put a timeline on this? Because I know we've been telling residents here for how long that we are going to get some kind of lights in the town here, and that we keep saying we're going to get them, but we don't. Is there possible we could put a timeline on this, and even if we go over by a week or a month or something, at least they know that, there's a deadline we want on it? Is there a possibility of doing that kind of a survey?
Yeah.
Thank
you. I think in terms of process that would assist with the timelines is our next step would be to bring this back to council for confirmation of priorities for locations, and then also target budget, which would be the number of locations you'd like us to proceed with. Once we had that, we could immediately begin procurement processes, and that would then allow us to establish at least a general timeline. I think at this point our intent is to proceed this season, and I can't think of any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that once the spring has completed and the ground is prepared, and so early summer is a general target. But I'd prefer if we wait till we begin the procurement process, because there's always things that can happen that can slow down those projects.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair, I completely agree with my council that we should be working towards lights at the A&W location, but I would hate to see this slowing down at 1 week because of that. So I really encourage administration to proceed with, like I said, the first 2 locations immediately this summer, and because once you start working with Alberta Transportation, that can slow you down by months. So I really don't want the A&W location to slow down any of this work. So I'm in full support of all of it, but just time is of the
I think administratively we'd be comfortable that those processes could take place parallel to each other.
Okay. All right. Does the administration have the information they need to proceed?
Good.
Okay. All right, we move on to draft bylaw number 2241, emergency management bylaw, and I believe Al is also presenting that one back to us.
Yep. Back at the December 10th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting, we did present you with the first draft of our emergency management bylaw for your review. During that review, Council did direct us to rework some of the areas to kind of make it a little more fluid, and we've done that. Specifically, the areas that we reworked in the new draft bylaw is the role of the advisory committee. At that December 10th meeting, the Council was very clear that they wanted all council to be a part of that committee, and we reworded that into the new bylaw. To go with that, it was also talked about some of the roles of the advisory committee with the council of whole. The other one was section 8.5, which has been changed to reflect the school boards and the plural in that, and we've done that as well. Section 12 has been modified to clarify the committee's role in declaring state or local emergency, and it kind of talks about, in the absence of the committee, how the mayor and the CAO, and it works down to that process as to who can actually do the declarations. One of the areas that council asked us to take a look at was section 6.5, and that's where the committee has the ability to authorize extra credit during an emergency situation, and the discussion revolved around council versus committee. And we felt in this bylaw, it's important that the committee has the ability to authorize those expenditures. Just when the emergencies happen, you may not have the opportunity to get a quorum of council together. That's why it's very important, following our committee structure, to have that ability to authorize those really extraordinary expenses that may occur during a major emergency. We have reformatted the bylaw to clean up the numbering system. So when we talk about section 5 is now section 4, and some of those other formats have been completed. So all in all, in the draft that you have now, all the changes are marked in red. And this is kind of where we're at. Again, we offer some feedback as to this draft of the bylaw, and if there's anything more that we need to modify, we're more than happy to address those.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair to administration, I said this last time, and I'm going to say it again because maybe I misunderstand the role of the committee. But from what I read, the role of the committee is to prepare us for emergencies in the future. And it's a committee that meets and makes plans, and makes documents, and prepares us for a future emergency. Once an emergency happens, that committee, I don't see anything in here that committee has any role during an emergency. Because of that, I am hesitant to delegate expenditure authority from this council to that committee. And I think expenditure power is one of the most important powers of council, and I hate to delegate it to any committee. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't understand why a preparation committee would ever need to have emergency expenditure power.
Okay.
Through the chair to Councillor Sorensen. One of the things that this bylaw also does, it delegates the power to declare a state or local emergency to the committee. And I think that's where this comes in, and that's why once they have that ability to declare that state or local emergency, the committee's taking on a lot of additional powers in doing that. And that is kind of why we want to make sure that doing the declaration, they're really representing the community at that level, and that's why it's kind of important that we have that ability to make those decisions on the authorization. What would the committee do during an emergency then? They would, through the chair, make the declaration, and in the declaration there are certain things that have to happen I'm just gonna pull it up because I got it right here. So when they make a declaration, they have to do it by resolution. Right? They have to identify the nature of the emergency, where it exists. They shall designate under those powers. Immediately after that declaration, the committee has to communicate that out to the residents. They also have to forward that information on to the province. So really they take the full role of almost like council. The committee acting as the council during those declarations.
I think if I may add to, I appreciate Councillor Sorensen, your sensitivity towards delegation of these important roles and responsibilities. And that this bylaw, the way it's currently structured as well, is that the committee is council and council is the committee. And so there's not, I think it's just more clarifying in terms of process, but it is council still that is operating in that function. Just that those functions can look a little different in an emergency situation because you may or may not have, all of council available. But the bylaw does designate the committee to be all of council members.
Okay. Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Schramm, thank you for taking the feedback from the last meeting. I don't really have any concerns, just to Councillor Sorensen's point there, the committee is basically council. And the reason why a committee is a lot easier to meet on a ad hoc basis than council, because we have certain rules under the MGA as a council, but not necessarily as a committee. And as a committee, we can do stuff via email and that sort of thing, where we wouldn't be able to do that as a council. So that, I think that's where maybe some of the confusion comes in, why you would delegate that to the committee, but it really still has the same rules as council, just work around some of that legislation.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, and I think maybe the mayor just kind of spoke to this a little bit. Just with 6.7, the committee will advise council on the status of the MVP related plans and programs at least once a year. Is that in here just to ensure that that happens in a formal setting where it is recorded? Because the committee is council.
I think I would add to that too, that there's the public facing nature of that, and that report to council is also in effect a report to the public and a public report. And so I think that's the more important piece there. Is then it happens in a setting like a public council meeting where members of the community can see and understand the processes that are happening.
And then I think I would just add for wordsmithing then that actually be specifically stated that the committee will advise council at a council meeting or a committee of the whole, because I mean advise means that could be an email, right? But I think, because otherwise like the committee is council, but if it was specifically in a council setting, I just think it would be help with clarity.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Sorensen?
Thank you, through the chair. On 11.4, it talks about the power to designate, I believe, power to designate emergency, state of emergency. And it says the mayor and the CEO can designate a state of emergency. What, is that to mean that they have to mutually agree, or what happens if they disagree, or can one of them, like, just trying to clarify there?
Yeah, to the chair, they have to agree on that. It has to be an agreement.
Are you guys comfortable with the wording?
Mayor Zahara?
I'm comfortable with the wording. I think it's pretty clear if there's an emergency or if there's not an emergency. And if there's an emergency and the CEO doesn't agree, the CEO may no longer be a part of that community. Whoever that CEO may be at the time. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And in the event there is a disagreement, once again, the committee would be coming into play into that to make that final determination.
Councillor Schnord?
I'd just like to thank you for all the changes. I think we should move forward because we can sit here and tweak this forever, going over it. I totally agree, and I guess when we want this, we don't want to be in a situation we have an emergency going on and some, like where there's questioning, and I have to agree with the mayor's comment. At the end of the day, somebody's in charge when something seriously happens, let it be the mayor, deputy mayor, regardless, someone has to say, hey, we have an emergency. Last thing we want to do is have an emergency, and one would be similar is like when we were flooding and we had certain things had to be done. And somebody has to be able to call it, and if it happens when we're all out of town somewhere, or the majority's out of town, somebody needs some kind of power to say, because we have to take it serious too, because you're not only just saying, hey, it's an emergency, you're contacting the province, so you're letting other parties know that something's going on, so if somebody, cried wolf for no reason, they have to answer for this. So I believe you've done a great job. There's probably a couple little tweaking, but overall, I think we can move forward. It's a great improvement.
CEO Derricott?
Thank you to Councillor Schnard and to all of you for your feedback and engagement on this particular bylaw. And just a reminder that the Provincial Emergency Management Act, which was passed, which was unfortunately in this province has been informed by a number of significant events in the last 10 years, wildfires, flooding, etc. And the intent of this is to place communities in a better position to respond should they find themselves in those circumstances. So the majority of the substance of this bylaw was taken from best practices and recommendations as per the provincial processes that they went through as they revamped the Emergency Management Act.
Okay. Also, just for consideration, I agree with the changes that have been made, and to further Councillor Curry's comment, if we can just clarify that that we meet once a year regarding, that it would have to be at a meeting would be appreciated. Councillor Bevan?
Good, Chair. Just on 4.4 there, if the mayor and deputy mayor are both absent, who will chair the committee?
Then they're both the acting mayor, whoever's.
But if mayor and deputy mayor are gone, who's the acting mayor?
Last person standing, I guess.
Well, is the next person in line?
I can answer that one.
Mayor Zahara?
I think we just can add in line there, the committee shall elect a chair,
Yeah,
choose a
something like
chairperson if both the mayor and the deputy mayor are unavailable.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Schnard?
Just an example, when you're gone to FCM and there's one person left behind, or two, for whatever reason they don't go, so in a case like that, it'd be some phone call, hey Trevor, you're the councillor in town, guess what, you're acting mayor, even though you may not be in line, but you're the last.
Well, I understand it, but it just doesn't say that, it's just both people.
Well, then it's whoever's in line, it's fine.
Yeah, and even if we're out of town, we're still available, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless the cell phone communication goes down then.
It's emergency.
Yeah.
Okay, so does administration have everything they need to proceed?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our sundry item, the homeless shelter during extreme cold weather, which is going to be presented by our General Manager of Community and Protective Services, Guy Latier.
Through the chair to council, as you are aware, we've had some very cold weather. We do have a homeless community within Edson, and we've been approached through multiple individuals requesting that the town of Edson provide emergency shelter during extreme cold weather conditions. At the time of the requests, I felt we did not have that mandate from council to provide that level of service and or the resources to do that. So we're bringing it to council and requesting your direction and to give us a mandate on how you would like us to provide or move forward with those requests, and if you feel, if you feel that's a level of service that we want to provide. Some initial considerations. Does council want to include it in its mandate to provide shelter to the homeless during extreme weather conditions? Is it the mandate of other levels of government or agencies to provide that, and maybe not us? And then risk management of facilities, safety of staff, both the staff, public, and homeless individuals. In multiple discussions in the last couple of days around staffing, I think we have a large challenge to face there if we were to provide a location on supervision of that location. As you know, with the homeless population, sometimes we can face potential possibilities of drugs and mental health issues and violence issues. And we would be putting staff in a position that might risk and be potentially unsafe for them. Right now, we do not have any staff who have any training or skill set or experience to work with potential of drugs and mental illness issues. So I don't think we can direct staff safely who do not have that skill set to provide supervision. I think that would be a very difficult thing for us to do, and a safety issue. So if we were to provide a location, we might have to consider that it would be unsupervised. I think also the same challenges that we would have with staff and safety and ensuring that they have the skill set to deal with those kind of people. If we were even to ask volunteers, we would have to ensure those volunteers would have that same skill set to be able to safely deal with those individuals. You're going to need 2 individuals because you can't have one individual in that location if you were going to do it. So if you're going to consider it, I think we have staffing challenges to provide that supervision. And then risk management of any facility we might put these individuals into, possibly on their own, or if we were able to find some supervision. For example, we had some really interesting conversations, and we were considering the hospitality room at Repsol. But if you were to put some people in there unsupervised, I mean, potentially there's some damage, and that's okay. But what happens if we have an ammonia leak and we have people in that facility, and then that happens? How do you protect their safety at that same time? So there's lots of challenges, potential financial costs, liability. So we're looking for direction on how you feel we should proceed.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Councillor Chenard.
Thank you for your presentation. I would agree with your comments, because I guess when you do something good, something bad, just a prime example we had. Now, I wonder if we could explore if there was such a thing that we could put something unmanned and not part of a building, like there's been other places like you put some kind of a temporary shelter up. But then the question is, how are we responsible? Because as soon as you put heat, any form of heat means there's cause of potential harm. I mean, if it's electric, or if someone gets electrocuted, so we can explore that option.
We can definitely explore that option. There would be those risks that you've identified already. Right. Yes, we're caught in that position. We want to help, and I'm just trying to provide the information and what challenges we'd have around those options, right? Mm-hmm. It would be difficult to come up with a quick solution that would be another facility or a tent. There has been recommendations of a sea can, right? So,
Echo trailer or something.
Yeah, or a trailer. Yeah, we'll purchase a trailer or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else has a question. Are we in the best position to be the ones opening up this type of a facility, or are there other agencies or groups within our community that would be that would have less liability against them if they were to do this, or that would be in a better position to open up something that would be beneficial?
To the chair, I believe the position of other organizations I've talked to were very much the same position as ours, is the liability, the risk management of their facility, and how they would staff it, and the safety and that around the staff. I think some of the organizations that have approached me and have the same issues we do.
Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, Mr. Latour, for bringing this forward. And we do have Erica from the Friendship Center here, who is the homelessness worker. I don't know if she has any thoughts, and it's up to you, Madam Chair, if you want to ask for her feedback. But I've really struggled with this because this is an important issue to me personally. It really bothers me when I see people out in the cold. I don't want somebody dying on our streets because they don't have a warm place to go. But I also am very concerned about our liability and the risk, especially a place like Repsol Place. The location, there's a NIMBYism. People are not going to like seeing this in their neighborhoods. Unfortunately, that's the reality. These are individuals with mental health, addictions, issues. I think staffing is a huge issue, volunteer-wise, an issue as well. I know that a church in a community down the road has started a program, and they utilize volunteers. Well, guess what? My understanding is they're running out of volunteers because after a couple nights, people get tired, and it's maybe not all it's cracked up to be. So I would personally like to see something that would be unmanned, that would be heated. I know with Taskwind they had some sheds that were heated at one point that they were using in the wintertime. Unfortunately, they burnt down. But you know, we have the liability if we have them, if we provide a space. We also have moral liability if they die on our streets. These are humans, and I think we have some responsibility there. So I think our general direction should be finding an unmanned space, whether it be an ATCO trailer, something that just provides heat where they can get out of the elements. The location's going to be a challenge. Maybe possibly somewhere in the airport where there isn't residences, where it be easily monitored, cleaned up, etc. Because that'll have to happen before and after. I'm just sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I think that would be the most doable solution for us as a community. I'm not really concerned about the cost because I don't think it's going to be that expensive, especially when you're talking once again about people's lives and that sort of thing. We do have a number of individuals that are living in their vehicles right now with heaters plugged into businesses in town. I don't know if the businesses are aware of that and how they would feel about that, but I think we do have some responsibility, and we need to find some sort of solution. And I think we also need to determine what is the level of service we're providing and what that expectation is. My expectation is a roof with heat, nothing more than that. Just providing that basic necessity of life. So,
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair to administration, I completely agree. Our staff do not have the training, and our workforce just is not prepared to take on this endeavor. I would be in support of creating a building, basically a concrete building, and renting it out to a nonprofit organization for 4 months of the year. It could be a gross rental agreements. We're providing all the utilities, but essentially they have full control and full liability of the structure for those 4 months. And then hopefully for the other remaining 8 months, we can find some other use for it, summer events or something, or even storage for tractors and whatever. But that's the kind of support I would be ready. I do feel for this issue, but I think we need to partner with some other organization that can handle this significant workload that this is going to take. And I think a rental agreement is the perfect situation where we provide the capital, the utilities, and none of the liability.
Councillor Chenard?
Just curious, we must have some kind of emergency response, because what would happen now if there's an individual freezing on the street or somewhere? How are we responding to that now? Do we have that kind of information?
Through the chair to Councillor Chouinard, that we would activate 911 and we would call an ambulance, and that individual would be picked up and delivered to the hospital.
Okay. The reason I'm saying that, because if we had some kind of a temporary shelter, and I'm just gonna pick on and say if it was close to the RCMP station, and then the thing is, because they're responding, so during a regular patrol of the RCMP, they could drive by the building, you know, not every 5 minutes, but just check on the building, make sure everything's good, you know, because if it's costing us money, you know, costing the taxpayer money, because someone pays for 911. But if we could put a building even by the airport or somewhere, and then put on the patrol of the RCMP on extreme cold nights, they could drive by, you know, with flashlight and check.
Through the chair, Councillor Chouinard, that's something we could definitely take into consideration. Long term, if we were given direction to come up with some direction and to put a solution together, we would have to also develop a policy around that. When we would open it, what conditions we would open it in, and some additional stuff like that. At this point, we're looking at what direction and at what level you want us to move forward on.
Okay.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, I would have to second what the mayor has said. I do agree that our staff, the liability of that and not having the training to put that into place. But I do think that we should be partnering with the organizations in the community that could provide us with that expertise. But to me, housing and just a warm space, I know right now that often they just crawl into the recycling society's bins just because it's outside of the wind. But a basic structure, I just come down to that they're humans. And we have an acute problem. 71 homeless people. Minus 48 this morning, guys. Minus 48. So that's a liability beyond anything else. So to me, it's a priority. And I do think this policy should have been in place long ago. Minus 48 is not new. Acute homelessness is new in this community, but minus 48 is not. So this is a top priority to me.
A question to administration, with some of the recommendations that have been brought forward tonight, what would be an approximate timeline that we would be looking at to getting anything in place?
To do something within one of our own facilities, if that was the direction, we might be able to do in a day or two, and come together. Again, that would be unsupervised at this time, unless I was directed to do other words, unless we were to find another solution or directed to do that. To find a building short-term might take a couple more days. If we try to find a potential trailer of some kind to purchase and do that, and then we would, I guess I would need approval and on the cost and to purchase that also, right? But we could do we are willing to, under the direction we're given, to do our very best to do that. If we were to do it in a location that we currently have, the question is where, and are you guys, is council willing to take on the liability of doing that without supervision?
Councillor Chouinard?
Is it possible, like, I mean, we're not inventing the wheel, so let's say Edmonton, where Edmonton opens up Commonwealth Stadium, we could simply find out who's responsible, because I'm sure a lot of the towns are doing it, but it's a matter of, because the question is liability, and today, how much are we liable?
Through the chair to Councillor Chouinard, the difference is that they have trained staff that they can access and resources to put towards opening up that facility. And they are putting people, trained people within their organization, social service workers, to be able to provide that service. We don't have that ability to do
So
that.
would we be able to ask a simple question or I don't know who we contact, like Brownlee or someone, and said, if we put in a shelter, what we're talking about, unmanned, simply ask the question, what is our liability? The good intentions are there, but how much are we really liable? We're doing it with good intentions, and if something went wrong, how liable are we?
Through the chair to Councillor Chouinard, and I'm not going to defer, but correct me if I'm wrong, we're very liable. If we put up a shelter and let people go there and tell them they can go there, and if something was to happen because it was unsupervised, we would be very liable for that.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that, that's certainly a question I'm comfortable that we can ask our legal counsel what their position is on that. But I don't disagree that there is certainly some concerns with that.
Amir Zahara.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and to Councillor Schnorr's point, I think this goes back to the 7 cities receive funding and they have the money to put towards this, plus they have large social agencies that support that work. They have a multitude of transit officers and peace officers that are able to assist with ensuring safety, where we don't have any of those resources. And my talking with people at UMA and different meetings I've been at, rural communities are struggling with this. We have a big problem here compared to others. Most communities you talk to, they have 5 or 6 that they're kind of wearing, they kind of couch surf and that sort of thing. So when we talk about our numbers, they're in shock. My understanding is Hinton, they have a MAT program, they have 5 or 6 that are showing up to theirs, to their MAT program. It's once again run by the church. The town is not really involved in that. I know that our agencies here in our community are strapped. They are to their limits. They've had huge funding cuts, and they may not have the resources. I think liability is certainly a concern for us, but I don't want that to be the hiccup for us actually doing the right thing, because we as a municipality, yes, we have liability if we open something up, and all of a sudden we don't have liability if somebody dies on our street. So I think we need to take that into account. I would like a longer term cold weather policy with either a permanent or a temporary structure unmanned. I guess we need to make a decision here today if we want to do something right now for what's going on right now. It's very cold outside. I'm not comfortable with opening up Repsol Place just because of how important that facility is and the things that can go sideways. We used to have the airport open 24/7. And yes, there was damage that was caused, that's why it's locked, but maybe that's a temporary solution for now. We just have to deal with the outcomes over the next few days when it's cold. I'm sure we can work with our social agencies to get the message that we're doing this as a temporary measure. Please don't destroy the building and please respect it. I'll throw that out there to council. I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to do at this point or if administration has any thoughts on that.
Does the administration have any thoughts on that before we begin discussion?
Yeah, I think I'll take that one, Guy. Again, we will do as directed. I think if council's prepared to deal with any consequences, potentially, mostly thinking, damage, petty vandalism, those types of issues to whatever facility they choose. Certainly, administration will be happy to do their absolute best to facilitate that. It's just a potential outcome.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, through emails and stuff, I think you all know my opinion, and I'm actually embarrassed to be a human being sitting here discussing this when it's 40 below outside. I really feel that we are lacking, that we don't have a plan in place for this already, and I think we're all so worried about our liability and trying to shove this on somebody else, and nobody is doing a darn thing. And there are people out there freezing, and it just is totally wrong. Anne Oriette and I volunteered. We said we could supervise at the Repsol Center. I mean, we need to do something. We can't just all sit back and think, oh, someone else should do it. And maybe your solution at the airport is excellent. It does give them someplace, and they have done that before. But we need to do something, and already it's too late, really. We've had 2 nights of very cold weather.
Councillor Chouinard.
Actually, Mayor's comment and every thought of billing is perfect. How fast could we react on this? Because the problem is the cold snaps for 5 days. So how fast could we react on this? And I guess for the resources for checking on it, if we could talk to the RCMP, they're monitoring these people out, make sure they're not freezing to that. So if we could open it up as of tomorrow, I don't know what's all in the airport, how to secure it, and we can ask the RCMP to monitor it. We got 5 days of cold.
Through the chair to Councilor Chouinard, we would make every effort after being given direction, and I have to admit the airport hasn't been on my radar as a potential facility, and we were concerned about the facilities that were being used by public a lot.
Right.
We were considering the outdoor skating rink area, but again, lots of public in that area, right? We would make every effort, and I believe we could make it happen for tomorrow night.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, so if I just may add, I think the only other option or other options are that, so the airport's only larger risk is that there's just sensitive equipment in there.
Right.
So if they do get into a certain space and damage equipment, could mean loss of service to the airport. Perhaps the building in Kinsman Park, I don't know what the current status is. It's under somewhat under.
It's under renovation.
Yeah, somewhat
It's not
under.
hot.
I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, but at least there's nothing sensitive
It's
in
not-
there.
It's not done renovations, it's not.
But
It
it
is
is,
Doesn't have heat.
Is it
No.
just a hot spot?
Yeah. So I just would suggest that would be a preferable alternative to me to the airport, because there's nothing really of a sensitive nature there that would cause damage or any damage other than just to the physical structure itself.
So it's a construction site, basically.
Yeah, I again, that's with the deferral to its current state.
Councillor Curry, did you have a comment?
No, that was actually what I was thinking, was the future youth shack, but I don't know where it's at in construction, so if it's totally,
Doesn't have a heater yet.
if there's actual construction in there. I think it is a point to remember that the airport was, until a few years ago, was open 24 hours.
And I used to stay in there at night, and
Yeah, like it was just.
unfortunately it
Post
got,
office.
yeah, same, yeah.
Same with the post office.
Councillor Sorensen?
I think the easy question is, should we open the door? The harder question is, when do we close the door? It could be -20 for the next 3 months. Are we prepared to do that?
Set a temperature.
And I'm not comfortable just opening the door with an open-ended, not making the tough decision on the other end. We should make both decisions today if that's the case.
Set a temperature.
Through the chair to Councillor Sorensen, I was doing my best also to research kind of temperature ranges. It was very, very difficult to find, but in the paper for Edmonton, they were indicating -35 as their temperature to open up their facilities for cold weather. I don't think I would go that cold myself, maybe -30, but I'm just sharing that as a piece of information.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Chouinard.
So if we can get the airport happening, I agree, and then we could discuss it and bring in something formally next council meeting, but I mean, it's cold. So I don't think we're allowed to make the motion tonight other than let's open the airport. We're at a committee.
No, yeah, quite frankly, I don't think we need specific direction from council other than basically your blessing to proceed in that
Yes.
direction, because
Yes,
we
by all
don't,
means.
to open an unsupervised site isn't going to cost us any money. We don't have to make any expenditures. And if council was to suggest that, like Mr. Latour suggested, we're prepared to act on that and try to provide what we feel is a suitable location even for tomorrow night.
Exactly.
Through the chair to the council, then what I'm hearing is that we would be interested in opening up the airport as potential sites if we could, starting tomorrow. I will also double check on the Kinsman site to confirm the level of construction that have been indicated. And if it is a possible option, we'll take a look at that also.
Yeah, thank you. And it would be my preference if council's comfortable, the direction would be that we open up a site,
Right,
not a specific
not
site.
direct.
Because if we can find a more suitable location than the airport, that would I think be better. And if it is under construction, as long as it's, if all the materials and equipment can be moved out of there and then it's just a dry space without any major dangers, then that's still a preferable location to me. And generally speaking, a construction area could be cleaned up pretty quickly.
Is there
but-
heat in that building?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's heated right now?
Oh, okay.
I'd just also ask that whatever, I'm fine with the choosing a building and not a specific building tonight, but that we also communicate with like the 30 other agencies in town that that manage the homeless.
That's obviously
you know.
critical. If we
Yes.
open it up and no one knows about it, then it doesn't do a whole lot of good, and we'll certainly do that work as well. Also, I think the direction is clear, and this is, I think, an important piece is we can build a better policy and better strategy for a longer term situation, and that this immediate response is only just what we can try to do right now. And we were, that has been Guy and I's conversation, is we don't want to be in the same position the next time we're in this situation. We want to have a protocol and a procedure, and whether or not that includes training or other things that put us in a better position to deal with this situation. And the point is well made, I think, by a number of councillors, is while it is administratively our obligation to protect the community from legal and financial and other types of liability, I think the more important is the moral liability that we have to do to provide service to all the people that call our community home.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen?
I through the chair, I really have to express my concern that we are making the easy moral choice right now to open a door, and we're not willing to make the professional choice or the mandated decision to decide when we're going to close that door. If we open that door to 50 or 70 people tomorrow morning, they're going to be there for 3-4 months because we haven't decided when we're going to close the door. And I'm not comfortable proceeding like that.
Okay, Mayor Zahara.
Yeah, and I, through the chair, through Councilor Sorensen, I think this is really the important service level. We don't want to make it comfortable that they want to stay there. So that's my concern as well, that this is all of a sudden thought of as permanent, or we have to continue doing this. I think that we should give general direction to administration right now that as long as it's -30 and colder, we will open up a facility. I am concerned a little bit about the Kinsman site, just because I think there's residents nearby, and there's other public that use that area quite frequently. But I'm happy that we are actually making some progress on this, and I agree that we need to have that set to administration right now. That if it's warmer than -30, then sorry, we're going to have to close the door, or if it's -25, that this is just for the extreme cold weather until we formulate a better policy and protocols. Because I don't want to be sitting here having that facility open for the rest of the winter because we haven't set clear direction. I have to agree with Councillor Sorensen.
Councillor Schnard?
Wouldn't it be just as easy as saying we temporarily open it until our next council meeting? That way we've solved the problem tonight. It's cold for the next 3-4 nights. So we put a time frame. The building is open for 1 week until our next council meeting. At our next council meeting, we set parameters. So I put a timeline. So for the next 7 days, or whatever the timeline is, we open the building, and at the next council meeting, gives everyone time to set temperatures time. So I would say direct you for the next 7 days, open the building for the homeless for extreme cold.
Thank you, Councillor Schnard. I think my administrative preference would be that it is a temperature-related thing. If that's the purpose of this program, then let's make sure that that's the program from the very beginning, and that parameter is very, very clear. Because I just think it becomes difficult to walk back from that if we're not cautious, as Councillor Sorensen has pointed out. And if -30 is the temperature, that's something we know, we can see, we can evaluate, and that makes managing the facility. And my interest here is to try and ensure that this is as successful as possible, because if there becomes issues, it becomes harder and harder to do this type of thing, even when it is the right thing or the best thing to do. So administratively, I would suggest that a temperature would be preferable, but again, we will obviously work at the discretion of council.
Okay, so if I were to sum this up, to get council's confirmation on a statement, so administration has information to proceed, that we would give administration the blessing to open up a building for heat in the event of an extreme weather event that reaches -30 overnight, that provided heat to go forward until we have a permanent plan in place. Is that something that council can agree with?
It makes sense, I mean, it's something.
Yeah, I think -35 is way too cold. I think,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
I think 30 is still pretty cold. I'd be willing to go up to -25, but
Well,
Okay.
see, that's one of what I'm trying to question, that
Yeah.
we open up temporary, because to one person, like City of Edmonton, saying -35.
If I may,
Yeah.
I think we can certainly start at -30, and council can adjust that at any, at their discretion. Yes. But I think we're talking about an immediate response, and so general guidance, and I don't want to get too caught up in the specifics of that. At this point, I think comfortable that -30 would be our immediate mandate, and we can obviously continue to bring information to council, including we will report to council via email on the progress of what happens and any obstacles we encounter and or outcomes that happen. Guy?
I would, through the chair to the council, I would like to seek a little bit more clarification. Are we looking at just in the evenings for that temperature range, or are we looking at that temperature range throughout the day completely? I would like some clarification with that, please.
Okay, Mayor Zahara?
from my personal view, I think it's an evening thing. I think there's places where individuals can go to, whether that's other agencies, Friendship Center, they can walk through some commercial buildings to stay warm. I think the evening is where the concern, where everything's locked down and they have nowhere to go. Just a further point, I think it's really important that we work closely with the agencies, and specifically with messaging to those clients and to those individuals that we have an expectation we're doing this. Please respect the space, and that we also communicate with the RCMP so they are aware that they can maybe do some odd checks. I don't want them sitting there all night, but maybe a check during the night to make sure everything's okay.
I think also in the short term, if I may, sorry, that we would also request maybe the RCMP assist in terms of in the mornings, if we're going in there and saying time to move on or whatever, that we would seek support in that as well.
And that was my original intention. If we were to open up a facility, it would be in the evening. And then in the mornings, our enforcement officers, with the help of an RCMP, would then close that center for the day. And that would also give us an opportunity to clean it and make sure, it was a safe location to re-enter at a different time.
Correct.
And if it was the airport, it still needs to function as an airport during the day.
Correct.
Or any other facility we would use, short of maybe the youth shack at Kinsman Park, if that's an option. Any other facility would need to be used during the day, most likely.
Okay. So to administration and to council, then what kind of evening timelines are we looking at? Is this an 8 p.m. start time, a 10 p.m. start time, or just leave it open after hours? And then
reflection shots at 5.
So if you did 8 to 8, would that make sense?
8 or 8 to 6. I don't know what time the
6,
airport
8 to
is
7.
needed.
I would be fine with you making the call at 4 o'clock when you leave work. Make the call right then.
I think the evening guideline, and perhaps we may take some input from the agencies who are most familiar with the behavioral patterns of some of these individuals. I think I'm less concerned about this specific time frame if council's comfortable with that, just that it will go through the evening but not persist in the daytime, and we will work under that parameter.
Okay. Does administration have enough information to proceed?
Through the council, or through the chair to the council, yes, we do. Thank you very much, and we'll do our very best to make this happen. And it might be a little challenging the first day, but we'll make it happen, and we'll get everything cleaned up over the next couple days and go with those parameters.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. It's what
Thank
we
you very
can
much.
do instead of not what we can't do. So, very much.
Thank you. So we will move on to questions from the media and public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting.
I actually just have one question. That's great. With regards to the pedestrian crossing lights, I don't know if it was mentioned before, but I'm just wondering if there will be like the overhang like you see in Edmonton. that has like a flashing light that, I don't know how to explain it really, but
Um,
despite just like
There is
across the sign just on the side, there's usually like overhang with flashing light on it. I'm just wondering if that's,
I'll get Guyla to respond to
It
that.
is the picture that you've seen on the
okay,
slide there.
okay, I wasn't sure.
That is very much the specs that we're going with.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that would be no overhang then, right?
I think, and this is partly what I was suggesting, if I may add to that, is that there are a variety of options. They just cost more, or they have
Right.
different configurations, and overhanging lights, they're available. There's just a little more cost
Okay.
to them. But I don't know, Mayor, if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think the standard is right now, unless it's really a high traffic, like in the city or something, it's those two signs, and they're very they're bright. It's hard to miss them. So.
Okay, that was all for me.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we're going to move into a closed camera session, but before we do that, do we take the 5-minute recess
If you
now?
would like to recess
Okay.
it.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Okay, so I just need a motion that we go in camera. Councillor Strong makes that motion. All in favor? Motion carried. I'll get a motion to adjourn the meeting. Councillor Wilkinson makes
You
that
have on
motion.
camera, I beat you, but you can have it.
All in favor? Motion carried.
You did it wrong when he went like that.
We did it by like